What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Bridging the Geekdoms. Today is going to be an interesting episode. We're going to talk about Superman Legacy. The casting has finally been announced of who will play Superman, Kal-El, Clark Kent, as well as Lois Lane. So I'm excited to talk about that. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on the casting. We're also going to talk about DC films, because it's really important to have an understanding of where DC Films is right now and where it's heading. And I think it's time for them to move on. And I think James Gunn has a lot of work to do right now. So let's get into it here on Bridging the Geekdoms. What's going on, everybody? Welcome. This should be an interesting episode. You know, it's funny. I released an episode earlier this week where it was talking about the casting rumors for Superman Legacy. And what happens? Not 15 minutes after I post that video, well, we get some casting news, some big casting news. You know, there was also a trailer that released today. And if everything goes to plan, I may have a guest on here who will absolutely want to talk about that trailer. Me, not so much. My internet has been kind of spotty today. It's been out for a few hours. It just came back up, and then it went down for about 5 more minutes, and hopefully it stays up for the remainder of this show. I'm hoping, because it should be good. Let's see. Triton, what is up, man? You can likely guess my opinion here. You want more Snyderverse, right? Is that what it is? Or no? I'm sorry. You want Christopher Nolan back. Lawrence, what's going on, my man? Let's go! Yeah, I'm excited. It should be a good episode because there is a lot to discuss when it comes to everything going on right now in the world of DC. So I want to know your thoughts. I want to hear what you think. So make sure in the comments you let us know throughout the show what you think of the castings of Superman and Lois, because I am looking forward to what people have to say. Believe it or not, Twitter and social media has been a little more it's been surprising to me, to say the least. I think more people are more excited than I thought would be excited about the change. Obviously, there's still the same people who refuse to acknowledge that there's anything but the Snyderverse. But yeah, it's been an interesting couple days. Triton, I'm in a lot of DC groups on Facebook, not just Snyder fan groups or Snyderverse fan groups. The reaction to Corn Sweat has been very, very, very polarizing across all of them. That's what I was just saying. You know, it's very interesting because it's not like I thought for sure. I thought that them announcing Corn Sweat as Superman, it was going to cause a bigger uproar. But honestly, like, yeah, you have those sections that are not too excited about it, but I think more people are on board with the idea than not. Obviously, you have those people who are like, well, he looks just like Henry Cavill. Why couldn't they keep Henry Cavill? We'll talk about that for sure. Lawrence says, I'm excited. Short and sweet and to the point. Like to see it, Lawrence. I like to see it. All right. So let's pull this up here. Now, I want to know what you think about this. So June 27th, which was just 2 days ago, a Hollywood Reporter posted, and they had the exclusive, Superman Legacy finds leads with David Cornsweet and Rachel Brosnahan as Clark Kent and Lois Lane. Now, wouldn't it be pretty interesting if they threw a wrench in the whole mix and they made Rachel Superman and David Cornsweet Lois Lane? I mean, I could see that in today's society. They're not going to do that, though. Anyway, so do you think that this was in response? Because that's what a lot of people are saying. Was this in response to how poorly The Flash has been doing in the box office? I truly believe that they wanted to hold this information for some big event. For some reason, I feel like James Gunn, he's a showman. He's going to want to make a big deal out of things like this. And the fact that Superman and Lois are announced via a trade on the internet, like, to me, that doesn't seem like something James Gunn wanted to have happen. I feel like whether they were going to show up at San Diego Comic-Con, because DC Studios still hasn't stated whether they will be there or not, whether it was at Comic-Con or whether it was at some other little get-together that he did for DC Studios in the coming months, I feel like that's where he wanted to do this announcement. Triton says, all I know is Cornswet looks like discount Cavill, and he thinks Cavill was dark and gritty and wants to be bright and optimistic Superman. Those comments haven't gone well with some. You're right. Here's the thing. I think people have this misunderstanding of Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill wasn't necessarily dark and gritty, but there was a darkness to his films. The darkness surrounded him. He wasn't the darkness in those films, and I think some people misunderstand that, and David Cornswet could very well misunderstand that as well. But here's the thing. I think it's the jawline more than anything that really kind of gives that Cavill look, not to mention that he is British, which don't all British people look the same? Is that what it is? Isn't that the same? I don't know. I'm just kidding. But honestly, I mean, when it comes down to it, he does have the right look. And that was one of the great things about Henry Cavill was his look. He looked like Clark Kent. He looked like Superman. So the fact that they went with somebody who is very similar looking, I don't think is a bad thing. I also don't agree with the whole idea and notion that if you're going to get somebody that looks like Cavill, why don't you just keep Cavill? And we're seeing why. With what happened in The Flash, we're seeing why you can't keep Cavill. Because people don't want to see those iterations. They don't want to see those iterations of these characters. Black Adam, Shazam, now The Flash. 3 box office failures. 3 actually not bad movies. Flash was good. Shazam wasn't bad. Black Adam was probably the weakest of the 3. But the fact remains, nobody cares about that universe anymore. And ideally, you don't want to have an uphill battle to climb when you're launching a new universe. Jay Casali, what's going on, my man? I'm down for David as Superman. He definitely has the look down. Triton says, oh, totally, this is classic Warner Brothers DC Films deflection. They did this a lot under Hamada with random announcements whenever some controversy came out. This is a little bit different in my opinion, because it wasn't so much controversy. I mean, the bad PR around The Flash, they could have announced this, the Monday after The Flash came out, which would probably have been a better idea. But we're talking about a week and a half they waited to announce this, to put this information out there. So here we sit, and they announced this. By that time, the bad PR for Flash was out. The bad juju, it wasn't going to make more money at this point. Whether they announced this or not, the Flash news, it was going to go. And I just read an article that there's like 1,500 theaters in the United States alone who are pulling the Flash this Friday. I mean, 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, they're pulling that. Like, after 3 weeks, they pull that film. That's insane. That's the fastest I think a superhero movie's ever been pulled from theaters. So this does nothing but just, yeah, I guess it's a little Band-Aid. Would I say it's classic Warner Brothers? I think it's classic Hollywood. All studios do it. All studios will announce and make sure they get good PR out there if something bad is happening around their studio. And I know it's easy to call out Warner Brothers because of certain things, but I think this isn't in the same malicious manner that it was under Hamada or, Tushihara and Jeff Johns. Discount Cavill. Oh, wow. Coming from a Snyder simp, that's something. Oh, boy. Hey, guys, play nice in the comments. Play nice. Why can't you move on? His time has passed. Cavill can't play forever. He had his time. Why can't you move on, Triton? Lawrence Fury, I agree. I think he's talking about me, not what Jay is saying. Why are you even here, Trenton? You can't let go of Snyder. Okay, dude. Play nice, guys. I'm all for conversation about the differences and the similarities between Cornsweet and Cavill. Look, it's bound to happen. We've done it with all iterations of characters. You take a look at Joker. For 20 years, we sat there and said no one is ever going to be better than Jack Nicholson as Joker. And along comes Heath Ledger and blows everybody's socks off. But there were still those comparisons prior to the movie coming out. What is it going to be like? And yes, I know the look was completely different and everything. And that's another thing. It also depends on how they portray Cornsweet on screen. He has the jawline, but they'll probably give him the little curl in the front. They'll probably, bulk him up, but probably not as much as Cavill was bulked up, because Snyder is a little bit different when he has his superheroes. He likes big, bulky guys. Cornsweet may not be as bulky. It's gonna be interesting to see. I think once we see all that happen, I think the comparison to Cavill will simmer down a bit. And then obviously when the movie comes out, it'll be much, much different. Jay, for me, I'm down for David as Superman. He definitely has the look down. I'm going to give him a chance like Christopher Reeve. Gunn is going for an unknown to play the role. I like it. Yeah, I mean, he's not very well known. He hasn't done much, especially, in the mainstream of Hollywood for sure. But I'm not, I'm, again, I think I said it probably the past couple weeks. I want to see, I think this is the best two pairing. I want to see these two on screen. I'm a big fan of Rachel Brosnahan. I was a huge fan of her character on The Blacklist. She was on it for a very short amount of time, but she was an excellent character on that. And I think if she can bring a little bit of that, a little bit of the Marvelous Miss Maisel, and kind of combine the two, I think we could have an excellent Lois Lane. And then David, I'm not, I guess I think he has a good look. Let's see. Triton says, I can't even see Jay's comments. Plus, I'm not I want Snyder and Cavill and Affleck forever guy. I think that's stupid. As I've always said, I just want Snyder to finish his 5-film saga. There you go, Jay. He can't see your comments, but there's his response. Jay, when Christopher Reeve got cast in 78, he was an unknown at the time, and he is now the definitive Superman for many. Again, that happens with characters all the time and actors all the time. It can always change. There was a conversation going on Twitter earlier where somebody simply said, Henry Cavill is my Superman. He's the best Superman and will always be the best Superman. And I stop and I think, you can't say that with certainty. Yeah, he's a great Superman, but David Cornsweet could do better. He could do worse. He could be equal. That's how it works. And I'm all for seeing different iterations of those characters. Jay. You're never going to get your 5 films. Snyder has moved on. Why can't you move on? Look, I don't want to have this about if we will get Snyderverse continued or not. This is about being excited about the DCU, talking about the DCU, talking about what's coming and what James Gunn should be doing right now, not what Zack Snyder's doing. So let's try and keep that out of this. We'll have another show. Don't worry. Look, up in the corner over there, way over there, animate the Snyderverse. Hashtag animate the Snyderverse. I will have that up there. So yes, I'm all for the Snyderverse. So people who come on here thinking that I'm not for the Snyderverse, I want to see it continued. I understand. Triton, you started no trouble, man. You're good. You are good, Triton. You're fine. I want you here. I want all of you here. I just want to keep the conversation going with what is current, what is currently going on, because it's exciting. We should be excited. We should be discussing and talking about what is coming. So this comes from the Hollywood Reporter. This is the report that came out after a lengthy search. David Cornsweet and Rachel Brosnahan will star in Superman Legacy, the film that will launch DC's new universe under writer-director Gunn and his DC Studios co-boss, Peter Safran. Cornsweet and Brosnahan were among 6 actors who vied for the lead roles, with Gunn filming screen tests over the June 17th weekend with Nicholas Hoult and Tom Brittney, also in contention to play Superman, and Emma Mackey and Phoebe Denevere in the running for Lois Lane. Let's see. Few roles are coveted or come with as much pressure as Superman. That's doubly true in the current landscape, as Cornswet will anchor a new universe as DC attempts to reinvent itself after a streak of misses with October's Black Adam, March's Shazam, and the recent The Flash. Only 3 actors have played the character on the big screen, with Christopher Reeve back in '78, Brandon Routh in Superman Returns in 2006, and Henry Cavill from 2013 to 2021 in Zack Snyder's Justice League. So, yeah, I mean, this was the announcement, and I have to say, I am excited about it. I am. I'm excited to see what these actors can bring to the role. But are we getting ahead of ourselves right now? We have 2 more movies that are coming out in regards to DC films. We've got Blue Beetle in about a month and a half, give or take. And then we got Aquaman 2 in about 5.5 months. With how bad the last 3 films have done and have lost Warner Brothers hundreds of millions of dollars, not a little bit, they've lost hundreds of millions of dollars for Warner Brothers. What should David Zaslav and James Gunn do at this time? Because don't forget, these are not DC studio movies. Blue Beetle and Aquaman are Warner Brother films. They're not DC studio films. Keep that in mind. That's very important to remember as these movies are starting to come out, because James Gunn doesn't necessarily have a say in whether they get released or not. I'm sure he and Safran can go to Zaslav and say, look, maybe it's not such a good idea to release these. But the decision ultimately comes down to David Zaslav and DeLuca and Abdi, who are, I believe, running Warner Brother Pictures right now. So those are really the people it comes down to. And then you have to think, well, what damage would it do if these movies weren't released? Because I want to know from James Gunn what he plans to do on getting fans excited. Releasing this coming out right now is all good and dandy. There we go. This is all good and dandy because, yeah, it's exciting. Sure, absolutely. Great to see this. But here's the thing. By August, people aren't going to be talking about this. Granted, yeah, they could announce who's going to play Lex Luthor, or they could announce who the villain's going to be, or they can announce who the Batman is. There's a lot of other things that they could announce over these next few months. You could even announce more films that are coming out. But that's not going to get people excited. So what is it that they can do? What is it that they can do to get people to back off and either go see Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2, or Warner Brothers decide, you know what? Let's just throw these on Max. Let's just release them, or let's not release them. What do you think? I want to know what your thoughts are. I want to know what you guys think about that, because should they actually release Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2? And I'm going to put this up here because I think it is a valid question at this point. It is. It's a valid question. Derpy Entertainment. DC did something right. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about Corn Sweat, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a great choice for sure. But the question we're talking about right now is, should they release Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2? Now, I think regardless, I think Blue Beetle is going to get released. There is some hype behind that, whether even if it's just from the Latina, crowd. There is hype for that movie. I'm excited for Blue Beetle. I'm not expecting it to be much. I'm not expecting it to be the next Dark Knight, as some would call it. As I'm sure so many people will say, this is the greatest DC film since The Dark Knight. But I don't believe that there's any reason to not release it. It was what, $100 million to make, maybe a little more than $100 million. And I think they can make that money back easily. There's not been a lot of marketing. They're definitely going to cut back the marketing for both that Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2. So I think if it can make that $350-400 million, it'll be a win for Warner Brothers at that time. Lawrence Fury says, Blue Beetle, yeah. Jay says, I think Blue Beetle should come out just because DC is rebooting. Does not mean we should disrespect all the hard work the director and actors did with these movies. I mean, look at Batgirl. Well, I do not, there's this idea going around now that what Peter Safran and David Zaslav said about Batgirl, about how it's unwatchable, is not true. I don't know. I mean, from the moment I saw, what's her name, Leslie Grace as Batgirl, the suit, it just didn't look great. And I know it was behind the scenes, but even the promotional image that they released, the official image they released, didn't look great. I can believe that movie, because it was being shot on slightly higher than a CW budget, essentially. And they had big ideas. So to me, I think, yeah, it makes sense not to have released Batgirl. Look, I do sit there and say I believe in artistic integrity. 100% I believe in artistic integrity. But the studio also does have the right, because it's their money, it's their studio, to release or not release certain things. My theory and my thoughts are, if you hire a director, you hire a writer, you hire these people, you all need to be in the same path. Like, you need to understand what is going to happen, who's doing what, what's happening. Would I like to see Batgirl? Sure, I'd like to see it, just to see what it was. But I also understand from a business standpoint why they didn't release it. And even if it wasn't because it was that bad, from a money standpoint, with how bad Warner Brothers was hemorrhaging money, and with the future of DC at the time still up in the air, I can understand it. It's just rare for a film to be axed at that stage. And I think that's why everybody gets so weirded out about it. Derpy says, honestly, Blue Beetle is fine, but Aquaman absolutely not, unless events happen to where it goes into the DCU. But I don't think it will matter, because the reputation of DC films, nobody cares. DC fans won't support it, and the general public have no idea who Blue Beetle is as a character. Nothing connects. Yeah, I mean, in a way, nothing connects. This leads me to one of my biggest issues with fans, more than anything. Not everything has to connect. Not every movie has to lead into another movie that isn't necessarily a sequel or something else. I went into Flash knowing full well that we will probably never see this version of the Flash, these versions of these characters, ever again. And I put that aside. I put that out of my mind and fully enjoyed the movie. I did the same thing with Shazam and Black Adam. I enjoyed those films, even though I knew at the time that we would probably never see them again. So this whole idea that these movies have to lead somewhere, I think is all poppycock. I don't think that we should be looking at any movie ever, MCU, DC, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, whatever it is, we should not ever look at a movie and say, where is this leading to? Because you then miss out on what could be a good movie. So that is my issue with a lot of fans today. Triton says Batgirl being canned is the only good decision Zaslav has made in regards to DC. I disagree. I know I disagree. I do like the James Gunn hire. But yeah, it wasn't a bad move. It wasn't a bad move. Derpy says Batgirl was made because the trend. Not a fan of it because of the trend. Are you talking about the idea that they have to make women in everything now? Um, Again, look, you can have strong female characters. We've had some in Hollywood over the years, the Laura Crofts, the Tomb Raiders, the Ripley's from Alien, the Princess Leia's. We've had strong women in the past. But yes, there is a trend going on recently where, well, yeah, I understand. Jay says, well, studios are greedy bastards. They disrespect their writers, aka the strike going on. All they care about is money. Yes, but they're a business. I mean, it's just like McDonald's. It's like where I work. It's like anywhere. They want money, 100%. But again, like I said, you need to have respect. You need to respect those you hire to a certain degree. I mean, yes, you hire, when we talk about writers, they hire writers for a certain thing. I understand why there's a writer's strike. I understand what's going on with the writer's strike. However, I also think they need to understand it. Hey, these movies, these TV shows aren't getting cheaper to make. And the more and more expensive they get, well, the less jobs there could be in the long run. So I think it's a very tightrope to walk there. I do stand with the writers on this. I do believe that they should be compensated more fairly, especially when it comes to streaming. But I do see that there is an issue with the way technology is, the way, how much things cost nowadays. I get it. I do. From a studio standpoint, I get it too. Jay, OMG, this is another issue I have. Why can't movies just be enjoyed for what it is? Why does everything have to be connected? This isn't Marvel. Again, I think it's a problem with Marvel fans too. I take a look at, what's a good example of that? The Eternals. I really enjoyed Eternals. I thought it was a fun movie. It had some boring parts, sure, but it was a fun film. And it doesn't connect to the overall MCU. And people were mad about that. And I'm like, no, I love it because of that. So yeah, you're right, Jay. Why can't we focus on their world and characters and not just the future and sequels? Derpy says, it kind of does, but I understand where you're going with it. I'm not sure where you're at there, buddy. Sorry. Lawrence, I watched the Flash movie to enjoy it. And you should go to a movie to enjoy it. 100%. Jay, wow, only good decision. Wow, Trent, you just... Jay, you just want to start fights, don't you, buddy? Don't you, buddy? Derpy, no, replacing gingers. Yeah, well, there's that agenda also. Yes, they are replacing gingers as well. Look, there's a lot going on in Hollywood right now, Derpy. There is a lot. Yeah, they've taken away a lot of gingers. Luckily, I'm not a ginger, so I don't need to worry about that. But still, my hair's gross right now, man. I was out cutting the grass before I came in here, so. Derpy, I just think writers are ungrateful where the average American today can afford a house. So the writers are ungrateful where an average American today can't afford a house. Look, writers don't make as much as you think. There's so many writers in Hollywood. Granted, you have those top tier writers who constantly get work, but when you start talking about those story group or story room writers, they're not getting paid a lot, and they could get a job for 6 months and then be out of a job for another year because they just can't get hired again or go anywhere else. So they rely on those residuals, and I think that's a big thing that people seem to not understand. Is residuals are a big part of being a writer in Hollywood, and I think that they should get residuals from streaming in some form or fashion. Jay says movies like Superman 78, Batman 99, Raimi's Spider-Man 2 are great movies because they only focus on the world and the characters. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you went and saw Superman in 1978, you didn't think, where is this going to lead? Are we going to get a sequel? 1989's Batman, same thing. You didn't go in there watching Batman and saying, oh, I hope they set up a sequel. Spider-Man 2, a little bit different, I would say. I mean, it's a great movie. I know from my standpoint, I was hoping that they would continue the Spider-Man universe at that point, but I also wasn't going into that movie saying, well, this better set up Spider-Man 3. I was going in there to watch Spider-Man kick Dr. Octopus's ass. That's what I want to go see. I wasn't going to see exactly them setting up more movies. Derpy says it has to be Marvel, though, to work. Triton, you say all this, yet the years of directionless flops, Hamada fetish is why DC Films is screwed up nowadays. Under Snyder, there was a story, a vision, a direction, a connectivity, and profit. You're not wrong. You're not. I mean, I can sit here and tell you why Snyder's universe didn't work. I can tell you. But everything you said right there are none of the reasons why it failed. The general audience, the large audience is why it failed. And unfortunately, that's also because of the backstabbing that was going on and the mishandling of the product. One of the big issues with DC has always been marketing. Their marketing department has been horrible for years. The Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, terrible name. Terrible name. Even Zack Snyder has said it. It's a terrible name. That hurt the movie. They made it like it was going to be Batman vs. Superman for this entire film, but it was basically Bruce Wayne versus Superman for 85% of it, and then there was 5% of it Batman versus Superman, and then the rest of it was the Trinity against Doomsday. So, the way they handled a lot of things during the Snyder term or years, that really screwed it up. Yeah, he had a story, he had a vision with a direction and a connectivity, but it should always have been, there was too much, and this sounds wrong. They were trying to build a universe, but gave one man too much power in creating the universe and vision. And I know everybody wants to sit there and comment, oh, Kevin Feige, look what Kevin Feige has done. It wasn't always just him. He had an idea. He had a vision of, hey, I would like to get to this at some point somehow. But then he would hire writers and directors, and they would come in and they would collaborate and work together to get to that point. It's just he was the thread that would go through each one to make sure things worked and stayed connected. And I think where a lot of things broke under Snyder is fans were not, the general audience, not fans necessarily, but the general audience, the DC movie-going fans were not excited about Snyder's aesthetic, look, feel. And as it continued and you kept getting that, the fans were falling back. And they even tried to continue that look, aesthetic, and feel without Snyder, and you can see it continued to fail. Not just because Snyder wasn't part of it, but because the audience just doesn't want that look and feel. I don't know if that makes sense. Lawrence, laughy face. Derpy, yeah, can't. Jay, Sam Raimi did a great job on Spider-Man because he did a good job focusing on Peter Parker and his world of characters, and that was fantastic. Yeah, I don't disagree, Jay. I don't disagree. I know you're a big Spider-Man fan, especially Tobey Maguire's. Derpy, it doesn't matter. Then make more than average American. They make more than the average American. They can, yes. Jay, we get it already, Trenton. God, you're a simp for size. Oh my God, Jay, chill. Enough. Stop calling out Triton. Zack Snyder was a visionary director with ideas that made it dark and depressing. I like Zack Snyder's look. I like his feel. I like his aesthetic. I like all of that. But again, it doesn't work for everybody. I've been known to come out. Look, when I came out of the Batman vs. Superman, I saw it opening day in 2016. I went to that movie opening day, and I walked out of that theater, and I looked at my friends who went with me, and I looked at them and said, what the fuck was that? That was not... My one friend fell asleep. Like, that was not the movie I wanted to see. That was not the movie I was expecting. It took me months, only after seeing the Ultimate Edition, that I was like, I get it now. And that's what happened. And yes, you can blame Jeff Johns. You can blame them cutting 30 minutes from the movie and rearranging scenes and what have you. But the damage was done at that point, unfortunately. Derpy says that's why it failed. Zack Snyder doesn't read comics, though, does he? I'm pretty sure he reads comics. James Gunn does, and so does he. Jay, Richard Donner and Tim Burton and even Nolan did Batman and Superman better than Snyder. I don't fully agree. Can we look? I know that it's so easy to talk about Snyder. I know it's so easy to fall back into that rut. But let's try and look forward. Let's try and see what can happen. What can we do to make DC exciting now? What can James Gunn do to make DC exciting now? It's been 10 years now. We have to move forward and get over. Exactly, Derpy. Thank you. It's been 10 years. Look, I hate to say it, but hey, animate the Snyderverse. Animate the Snyderverse, I say. Lawrence says, I agree. I don't like the tone of the story in BVS. Triton says, BVS was dark because of its themes and largely being a political thriller. Man of Steel and the Snyder Cut aren't even dark. They're just serious. They're genuinely hopeful and inspiring. I agree. But remember, even if the story isn't dark, Zack Snyder, his aesthetic, his photography is very dark. Take a look at, directors have certain feels to their movies. You take a look at Christopher Nolan. Nolan loves to have the volume really low when people are talking and then really loud when there's action going on. And he does that kind of stuff because he thinks it helps people pay attention more. They're watching the movie more. They're not following because they have to focus on what is being said. Zack Snyder is a visual storyteller, so he's going to give his little flair of visuals. And the thing that works when it's special effects heavy, and this is something that people don't understand about special effects, is when it's darker, it's easier to hide bad CGI. Look at The Flash. Look how bright and flashy the Flash movie is, and you see how bad some of that CGI is. You take a look at a movie like Zack Snyder's Justice League or Batman vs. Superman, the CGI, the special effects are fantastic because it's a darker aesthetic, a darker feeling movie, not because of the story, but the look is darker. And the audience, whether it's good or bad, have grown accustomed to what Marvel was doing, where it's bright and colorful. And Superman, people want a bright and colorful Superman. It's just how it is. They're not always talking about his mood. Triton also says, in the other DCU films considered Snyderverse by the Snyderverse fanbase, Suicide Squad 2016, Wonder Woman 17, Aquaman aren't dark either. Again, like I just said, it's not just about the story, it's about the look. And Wonder Woman, great movie, but you can absolutely feel Snyder's influence there. And he was a big part of helping Patty Jenkins understand the action sequences, and you can definitely tell she took a lot and was inspired by a lot of what Zack Snyder did. And the reason why you can tell that is because you then take a look at her sequel, Wonder Woman 84, and it's the complete opposite. There's like no Zack Snyder influence in there, and you can see that was more Patty Jenkins style, Wonder Woman 84, than the first Wonder Woman. Aquaman, again, it's not a dark movie, but I will say it's a stunning, beautiful movie. I do love that movie. James Wan did a fantastic job with Aquaman, especially with the underwater scenes. You take a look at a lot of underwater movies today, Little Mermaid, for instance. You take a look at what they did with Namor and Black Panther 2. This goes back to what I was just saying about the CGI. Because if you watch Aquaman, the CGI of the hair and underwater scenes with the people, it didn't look great. It wasn't terrible, but it didn't look great. But they also made a decision on making the underwater scenes very colorful and bright. You take a look at Little Mermaid, you take a look at Black Panther 2 with the underwater stuff, it's very dark. And the CGI doesn't stick out as much. So if you want like a good example, that's a great example there to compare Aquaman to like Little Mermaid and Black Panther. That's not to say they don't have colorful elements in those movies, but it's not as prevalent as Aquaman was. Triton says, to me, all the dark complaints seem to stem solely from BVS. You're right. But again, I know for a fact, like, just take my mother. I know she's she's an older lady, but she asked me, like, why are these films so dark? Not from a story standpoint, but from a visual standpoint. And that does turn people off. That does. Even Christopher Nolan, his movies weren't that dark. You know, his Batman films had some dark elements. Obviously, Batman is going to be in the dark, but he found ways to utilize colors a little bit differently. You take a look at the first Batman, Batman Begins. There's a lot of orange in the night scenes, which kind of brighten it up a little bit. In The Dark Knight, there's a lot more bluish tint to everything, and oddly, The Dark Knight Rises takes place a lot during the day. I don't know why. Lawrence, I'm going to be honest, the Ultimate Edition was the same movie to me. Hey, I can see that. I know I've talked to a couple people who said that it didn't change their opinion of BVS. Jay, were we even watching the same movie? Triton, not what I saw. Triton, your Nolan volume comment reminded me I need to rewatch Tenet. That's a great example of his volume. That it annoys me. And you know, it's a crazy thing because Nolan had a bigger hand in Man of Steel. And Man of Steel is done like that. Go watch Man of Steel. You know, it's hard to watch it. I have HomePods. I have 2 HomePods with Dolby sound with them. And even with those on, you know, I have to turn the volume up just a little bit to hear what they're saying. And then boom, there's loud explosions at the big action sequences. And it like blows everything away in the living room. It's crazy. And that was definitely a Nolan recommendation, I'm sure. Derpy, I hated Affleck's Batman besides him as Bruce in Combat and Gadgets. I didn't like it. Branding and prostitution scenes was just too much, but that's why it failed. It was dark. It was more of a, you know, Frank Miller take on Batman because Frank Miller's Batman was a lot darker than what we saw previous and even since. You know, there's not been as dark of a Batman really. I mean, there's been some iterations. You know, the branding was one thing. Again, there was no buildup for that Batman. I think that's why a lot of people don't like that version. Perhaps, Derpy, if there would have been a bigger buildup, not saying, you know, 3 solo films before getting there, but even a better understanding of the character, maybe it would have worked for you. Maybe. The general audience isn't taking their kid to that. No, and that was another thing. The Batman vs. Superman, thank you, Derpy. You reminded me of this. Batman vs. Superman and what Zack Snyder was making did not, because of how dark it looked, did not bode well for itself for getting children to want to go. I mean, I have kids, you know, and back then it's 10 years ago. So my oldest, he would have been 4 or 5 years old at the time. So during that, you know, he was young. My other son, my second second oldest is just 2 years younger. So as those years were going on, you know what they wanted to watch more as kids? The bright, light, and fluffy Marvel, you know? And kids are a big part of what draw the box office up for these superhero films. You're not wrong. You're not wrong, Derpy. Jay, just like David said, I want to see bright, hopeful Superman standing with truth and justice. I want to see him back on the big screen. We haven't had that since Superman Returns. I disagree. We saw that in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and we saw that hints of it at the end of Batman vs. Superman, and we even saw bits of it in Man of Steel. But I get it. You want to see a whole movie like that. You want to see a whole character like that, and that's fine. Derpy says the best depiction of DC characters are the Dini and Tim universe, but if you ask the general public in their eyes what DC is, they think Adam West, Christopher Reeves, Super Friends, Linda Carter. I don't know about that. I think people don't have an idea specifically of what DC is, because there is, like, you ask people what Marvel is today, and a great example is you go on Twitter and you see a report on Twitter or Facebook or something that says Marvel to kill off major character. The first thing that pops in everybody's head is, oh geez, what character are they killing off in the movies? But they're actually talking about the comics. That's where people run to right away are the movies when it comes to Marvel, because it's built up such a brand. With DC, it's so you've got 40 years almost of these films of all different little sections of film So yeah, some people will sit there and say Christopher Reeves is my Superman. Some will say Henry Cavill. Some will say Michael Keaton. Some will say Ben Affleck. So there's so much of a disconnect because of that. I think that's what James Gunn needs to establish. He needs to start today in establishing that we are making a universe that is going to stand on its own. And I think that's very important for them to do. Triton says, I'd show my kids BVS. I mean, I saw Aliens for the first time at like 8 and I turned out okay. I mean, don't get me wrong. I had my kids watch Batman vs Superman. I had my kids watch Man of Steel. I had my kids watch the suit. My daughter is named Harley Quinn. That is her name, birth certificate name, Harley Quinn. We do spell it a little bit differently, but her name is Harley Quinn. Do you think a kid named Harley Quinn is not going to watch movies with Harley Quinn in it? Not a chance. So, yeah, she watched those movies, and I was okay with that. The problem is when you turn it around and you take a look, the kids aren't sitting there when the trailers and the TV commercials are on. They're not saying, Dad, I want to go see that. But when they see Iron Man, when they see Captain America, when they see Spider-Man, Dad, I want to see that. And that's kind of how it happens because of the look and the feel of those movies, unfortunately. Derpy, that's the crowd Gunn has to win over more than us. You're talking about this crowd here that look at Adam West, Christopher Reeves, and everything? I can buy that. Well, that's just you, Triton. The majority isn't doing that, taking their kids to those movies. Jay says, hell, Gunn should take influence from the DCAU Superman. The animated series was one of the best takes on Superman. With Tim Daly voicing him, he should do that. Tim Daly only voiced him on the animated series of Superman. There was somebody else who did the Justice League voice, if I'm not mistaken, which was also part of the animated Dini-verse and stuff. Yeah, I think so. I can't remember now. Jay says, to be honest, Snyder too much influence from Nolan's Batman, making Superman too realistic in the real world. Jay, I'm going to tell you right now. You want to know why? Because it wasn't Snyder who took too much influence from Nolan's Batman. Nolan and David Goyer made the story for Man of Steel. The same two who worked on Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises. That's why that Superman, why Man of Steel, it feels like a Christopher Nolan movie shot by Zack Snyder. That's why. Zack Snyder didn't write Man of Steel. Zack Snyder was brought on by Christopher Nolan to direct Man of Steel. Triton, my DC is Snyderverse, Arrowverse, New 52, and Injustice. Those are what made me go from Batman fan to DC fan. Makes sense. I remember when New 52 came out. Oh, man. It was a huge deal. That's gross. Sorry about that. No, when the New 52 came out, that was a huge deal. Because if you think about it, like, they were rebooting the universe. What was that, 2010, 2011? I don't know. Somewhere around there. And that was a huge deal. And it worked for a while. It really did. And I think it brought in a lot of new fans, but then it started to fizzle out, which is why they then did Rebirth, which did the same thing, brought fans back in, and then it fizzled out again. So yeah, Arrowverse was good for the first, 3 or 4 seasons of Arrow were good. Flash was good for the first 3 seasons. Legends was good for the first 2 seasons. Supergirl had maybe a total of like 10 good episodes. So, I mean, the Arrowverse is hit or miss for me. Black Lightning was good. I really enjoyed the first season of Black Lightning. But yeah, I actually never watched Stargirl. By that time, I was already checked out. Oh, a lot of comments here, guys. Derpy says, I just want Golden Age stuff with this universe with specific characters. Here's the thing. In reality, the general public and kids don't care about the comics in reality. They just want good story. Well, that's my complaint about all Hollywood right now, Derpy. I'm sick of the politics pushing. I'm sick of the agenda pushing. Just make a good story. And I don't care, if if it's David Cornsweet that's in there, if he's the one that's Superman, as long as it's a good story, I don't care who's in the role. As long as it's a good story and the actor does well with what the story is. Tim Daly was Superman, the animated series, Justice League, Doom movie, Superman, Public Enemies, and more. Yeah, he did do a bunch, but I'm talking about the Tim Dini universe, which was Batman the animated series, Superman the animated series, Justice League, and Justice League Unlimited. Those there, I'm pretty sure they had two different people voicing Superman at that time. Uh-oh. Back from his exploits of the MLB, here's Kenneth Yambo. What's going on, man?
What's going on, Rob? I apologize for the delay in my appearance. It was a hectic hour in my household, but
you're fine. You're fine.
I don't know if you've been. Once you told me your internet went out, I was like, oh, okay, so then we're probably not going to show. And then I stepped away, and then I looked at my phone. I'm like, holy shit, I'm not supposed to leave. Stay close by. So good to be here. Where are we? So I could at least chime in a little bit.
My question to everybody is, should they release Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2? And then everybody's talking about, what the DC should be right now, or what they should be doing right now. We've gone back and forth with a lot of stuff, like Derpy here. He's like, I want the Golden Age stuff with the universe with specific characters. We're also talking about why people didn't go and see the Snyderverse and that DCEU. There's some talk that, the reason for it is because it was just dark, not just story-wise, but even visually. They were dark. They were dark movies, and that doesn't bode well for kids wanting to go see the films. So that's kind of what we've been talking about here.
Okay, yeah, so just to chime in on the Snyderverse stuff, I was a fan that would definitely go to the theaters to watch his movies, so excuse me as my dog escapes, but I really enjoyed those movies, but those movies are not for everybody, and there's a lot of stuff that you have to infer in those movies that may not just be for the general audience. I don't think, and this is not an insult for the general audience, but when we go and sit in a movie theater, we're not trying to think, we're just trying to let go and kind of watch, and there's a lot of philosophical ideologies that are presented in Zack Snyder's movies, and not even just DC movies, just in general, and that's not for everybody, honestly. So that's kind of a quick point on that. But it's actually pretty funny. I was talking to a coworker of mine about the Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2 thing, and here's my take. So they released these movies in the wrong order this year, in my opinion. If everything was going to go the way that it was supposed to go, Flash should have been the movie that closes this chapter out, because it would make a lot more sense in terms of just, boom, that universe is done. We're going to ramp up into our own universe. So my thing is that obviously it doesn't seem fiscally responsible at the moment to release these movies. I feel like if these movies bomb as bad as The Flash and Shazam have, wouldn't Warner Bros. Kind of be in a little bit of trouble, honestly? They just can't have bomb after bomb release in theaters. So in order for them to create a healthy distance between this era of DC and the new era of the DCU, I think both of these movies should kind of just go directly to streaming, honestly. That's kind of my take on it. I think I read an article the other day where they would have lost less money if they released The Flash on Max rather than in the theaters. So I think it's a serious conversation to have, just to distance these two visions of the DC universe. And I don't know, you kind of have to wonder what James Gunn is thinking right now, where it's like, the box office performances of these movies, it's like, holy shit, did I really get myself into something that I might not be able to back myself out of anytime soon, So, I'm curious to hear what you think about that. I don't know if that's been brought up just quite yet, but that's definitely a possibility that I think, truthfully, would be their best route right now, because
and that's kind of what I was saying. Is it financially responsible for them to release it just on Max? I mean, if they're going to lose more money releasing it on Max, even if, let's say Aquaman does what Flash did, will they lose more money doing it that way or releasing it on Max. And I think that's the way they have to look at it. I think Blue Beetle should be released regardless. I think there's enough excitement, and it didn't cost that much. And if they keep marketing as low as possible, it's going to hit that 300 to 400 million mark and probably make them some money regardless. But I think it's the Aquaman 2 that's going to.
I personally disagree. I'm excited to see Blue Beetle. I will definitely be somebody that sees it in the theaters, but I think for just a general audience, it's just there's an appeal, I feel like, to a certain fan base within the DC for Blue Beetle because of the people that have watched like the earlier animated shows where he was featured and some of the animated movies that he's been featured in with the Teen Titans and stuff. But I don't know if this is a character that has like general audience wide appeal.
No, but I think there's definitely an excitement in the Latina crowd. They definitely want to see it, and I think my kids are excited about it. Okay. And we go back to that kid aspect that we've been talking about just the last 5-10 minutes is kids want to see if they want to see these movies, they're going to make money. Are they going to make billions of dollars? No, but they will make money because of kids. And I know my kids, ranging from 14 down to 6, 7, 4. I don't know. I have too many kids to keep count. But they all have a desire to see that movie. So
right.
And again, that doesn't mean it's going to make buku bucks. I think you're looking at Flash. I'm looking at Shazam. I'm looking at Black Adam. They all made between a $300 and $400 million range. And I think that is going to be, Flash hasn't yet, but I think that's a very good possibility. And I think with Blue Beetle costing around $100 million, and let's say another $100 million in marketing, maybe even less if they keep it down low, they hit that $300 million mark. That's good for their pocketbook. Yeah. That looks good for them.
I just think that there needs to be distance, honestly. I think the exact date is escaping me, but isn't the Superman Legacy supposed to release in July of 2025?
2025, yeah.
I think that's a little too soon. Maybe now saying
too
2025, soon. That's further away than I'm realizing. But it's just, I don't know, man. Like, they really do need a reset year. Like, we're a year where they don't really release any like big screen projects, and they just try to focus on the smaller screen projects, try to release things that throughout the year, but just kind of take a reset and just a step back and see what they're doing. Because one of the things that James Gunn said in that introductory video for the DCU was that story is paramount. Story is important. And that's something that I hope is really being their focus is being poured into for these upcoming projects. I know that the Joker 2 has basically been wrapped up in terms of like principal photography, right? So that post-production can go on, and that's maybe something that could be released in 2024. But I feel like they have a real opportunity with the Joker, and this is not movie perhaps, but to just kind of establish how things are going to go on from here on out, where maybe the first, how every movie has their introductory logos and stuff. Maybe we get something where it like spans the DC multiverse, and then it settles on an Earth, and then the logo comes out where it's like DC Elseworlds.
Yeah.
They really need to start making it clear that we're going to be witnessing this universe through a multiversal lens, and while the main story that you're going to care about is going to be the DCU, we're going to have other stories that are scattered throughout the universe that are clearly Elseworlds. So I feel like that's a real only opportunity that they have to kind of push how they're going to move things going forward. And I think that'd be pretty cool, honestly. Like, I don't know, I'm just a nerd like that, where if I see something cool within like the opening credit logos sequence, like I'll point it out. So that'd be something that's like small, wouldn't cost them that much, and would really kind of usher in the new era of the DC universe, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe. We're going to keep going here for a little bit. I got another person who wants to join on, so let's see what happens. Derpy does say, I just want the Watchtower in Justice League, not a fan of Hall of Justice, hoping for it to happen. I think that we're going to see the Hall of Justice, unfortunately. With James Gunn, he does like that older style of Superman and the Justice League. Maybe we get the Watchtower, but I think they'll go with the Hall of Justice.
Ooh, speaking of the castings, I obviously was not here for your discussion on it, but what are your, I guess, summarized thoughts on the castings that we got so far?
I like it. I wanted Rachel Brosnahan. The moment I heard her name,
Yeah.
I've wanted her to play Lois. I think she's going to be perfect for Lois.
Yeah.
David Cornsweet, I looked at it and said, look, he looks the part. I think he'll do well. He's not a big name. Let's just see what happens with him. Like I'm okay with what they're doing in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember this is going to be our iteration of Superman and Lois Lane on the cinematic platform, TV platform, video game platform, animation platform. So
yeah,
you really have to take that into consideration just with the castings and stuff, that we probably are going to get lesser known actors for these roles, because these are really actors and actresses that are going to be the future of Hollywood. So
yeah. What's going on, Prime? How are you doing?
What's good, brother? What's good, everybody?
What's up? Hey, I want to read this comment real quick. Jay says the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I miss those days of movies or comic book movies. I don't know, man. I think we're at a better age for comic book movies. Not saying that those movies were bad, but we've definitely come a long way.
No.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You have to take into consideration too that we have the technology to make the characters in that world more lifelike.
Yeah.
So, but it also depends on who is actually doing the actual directing, and who's really doing the special effects, and who has that visionary mind to actually showcase that, to bring those type of characters to life.
Yeah.
So you gotta look at that. Now we have the technology, we can actually do it. But I know you was talking about Superman and talking about it. I mean, I would say this. I could just talk about the casting. How much time you got left before you want to dip out? Because I catch you at the back end.
No, you're fine. I'm free right now, so we're good.
Yeah, I'm good too. So,
well, I would say this, so people can get a little bit more detail. I mean, they have to go with unknown names. Now, what's the lady's name that's playing Lois?
Rachel Brosnahan.
Brosnahan. People got to realize that her resume is actually good. She didn't win an Academy Award, all different type of awards, but it's been in the back burner. She's not like a real known name, but her accolades showcase for herself. So that's a good thing pertaining to her. But when it comes down to Kordenstein, him, I would say this. We just have to wait and see how everything is going to pan out with him. He looks like Henry Cavill, but he's gonna, it all depends on how, how it's going to be written. It's going to be it has to be the chemistry between him and Brosnahan. That's the main thing. And we also got to understand is that what type of we have a foundation of what type of Superman story that we're going to get, but how is it going to carry over? Because I've always said this. It has to be a median. If you're not going to have a median pertaining to the story, meaning that you cannot make that story strictly kiddish and Boy Scoutish. You're going to have some of the serious element. You're going to have Lois Lane be the Lois Lane that is smart in this new age. Because if you go back to the old Lois Lane, there's going to be a lot of problems with that. A lot of women ain't gonna like that, because basically what it's saying is that she's stupid. So
no, Rachel Brosnahan's a great actress. I've talked about it. She did that series Marvelous Miss Maisel. She was she had a small part on The Blacklist, which I really liked. So she's a good actress, and she can bring that smarts and the intelligence that Lois Lane needs to have. So I think when I look at it, Cornsweet, I think, was a safe get, a good get, but safe. I think Rachel Brosnahan, I think, is the standout in the casting right now, just in my opinion.
Yeah, and it also,
absolutely.
What costume looks like in terms of like what the design's going to be for him. So maybe they tested some costumes out and they just figured that he just looked the best and played the best, honestly. So maybe that's just also another factor going into it.
Derpy, you talking about Ken there? Is Ken the one chewing the bubble gum, looking like he's about to make boss moves in the front office? Is that who you're talking about?
Hey, I'm trying to.
Let's see what else do we got here. Good stories. Yeah, Lauren says good story is what matters most to me, and that's another thing we're talking about is,
Yep.
what should James Gunn focus on moving forward with the DC, film universe and the DCU. It should be story that comes first.
Well, I'll say this. The key thing that James Gunn has iterated, and he said this a couple of times, is that the Trinity is going to be the one that's going to introduce all the other characters in DC. So to get all the other characters that is in DC, you have to utilize the Trinity. And that's why, I see people that's tripping out saying, well, they're going to introduce different characters in the Superman film. Well, that makes a lot of sense because, that is how you do it. That is basically the perfect way to actually do it instead of just doing their own personal. For instance, we know the Authority is going to be a Superman legacy. Once they're introduced, people are going to want to know more about them after they watch the movie. They're going to go watch that movie. Same thing when it comes down to if it's any other villains or any other characters that's going to be introduced in a Superman legacy.
Oh, exactly.
So if you're not a DC aficionado, you will not know who the Authority is.
Look,
okay?
I'm really good with DC, and I didn't know. I've heard of them, but I don't know much about them.
Yeah, Wildstorm. Wildstorm got some great comics, and I think that when he said the Authority, I was like, oh shit. So that's for people to understand what the Authority is. They've even said it numerous times, but
yeah,
for the people that don't know, they're the equivalent of the boys.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that said a few times. I want to jump down. I know there's a lot of different comments here. So Hunter, first off, thanks for joining. Week's going pretty good. Hope your week's going well. Triton has a good comment I want us to discuss here a bit. Triton, now, for those of you who don't hear Prime and Ken, Triton is a big Snyder fan. He wants to see the Snyderverse restored and completed. That's what he wants to see, but he's not, he's not one of those diehard crazy Snyder fans that are out there. But he goes, putting aside his bias, Gunn's plan to have his DCU spread across all forms of media is ridiculous. It'll be both stupidly time-consuming and hella expensive to keep up with 100%. And I, in a way, agree. I think it's going to be difficult. I can understand TV and film, even, having some comics or animation running side by side here and there, I think. But he's even been talking about video games. And I think that's going to be really difficult because it's hard to it's hard to tell a compelling, and I don't take this the wrong way. You can tell compelling stories through video games, but the character, when you're playing a character who dies 50 times playing a video game, it's hard to kind of make that match to what's going on in the grand scheme of things. But also, just like you said, time consuming. What do you think? What do you think? Do you think it's a bad idea to utilize all these mediums, or do you think, hey, let's see what happens. Let's see what he can do.
Oh, I think it's a pretty cool idea, honestly, to have video games kind of synced up with the animated TV and film divisions, just because I feel like, and he said this before, it's a form of storytelling that really hasn't been done yet. And I think that's something that really appeals to the general audience, is something that's unique. And I think that having that continuity and just having that cohesiveness between all mediums is just something that Marvel clearly doesn't have, and I just feel like no major studio really does have. And I think it would be an interesting experiment, and I think it would be a good way to just kind of fill in the gaps in between the stories, to just kind of not have a major impact on it, but yes, the Superman that you're playing with in this game is the Superman that you saw in the movie and stuff, and it just fills in the blank in between Superman Legacy and, let's say, the next time that he shows up is in the Authority film. So I think it's a pretty cool idea. Like the comment said, it would be incredibly hard to pull off, but something that I really do hope that they really try to do, because I know I would be first in line to get some of these games that, especially if it's important to the story. I feel like I'm one of those fans that, regardless of what the medium is, I will consume it, especially if it's part of the larger cohesive universe. So I'm all for it, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. I am as well. I'm all for it, but I just, you just have to understand, everybody is, it all depends on how the execution is. And that's going to be the major key. The execution is going to be key, and how you're going to conduct it. So conducting it and then executing it, that's going to be the major key. So those are the things that people have to really look out for. And on top of that, I think exactly what what James Gunn had actually said was, and he said in the article, and quote, he said that with him being with the MCU, now he has a little bit more knowledge on how to orchestrate and know how to do this now, and how to put everything together. Because when they did the MCU, when they first started out, they were just going right off the head. They were just going as they go. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to do the same thing that they did. He's not going to do the same thing that they did with the MCU. They're going to do something a little bit differently. But at the same time, and the great thing about that he said that my key is only this, like I said, it's going to be the execution. How are you going to do it? And with DC, it has so much lore. And that's the thing that people fail to understand. And last but not least, the tone is what's going to be the key. You cannot make DC like Marvel. See, that's the thing people fail to realize about Marvel is still under Disney's umbrella. So they only can do but so much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
DC, they can go strictly R on everything if they wanted to. They don't have no restrictions to the opposed of what Marvel was. So I mean, they pushed a PG-13 to the brink, to the level. But
and I think so. I want to touch on two things here, or three things really. So first off, what Triton says, about the video games here, he's not wrong. The general audience isn't going to want to consume a 50 to 100 hour long game, even a 10-hour long game. Consumers, the general audience isn't going to consume that. So doing the video games, you have to, it's not going to be as connected as I think we want it to, or as hardcore fans want it to be. But then what you're saying about Prime, what you're saying about the idea of making things R and going as dark as they want and things like that I think is a big problem. I don't know if you were listening earlier on, but that was something we were talking about, is how Marvel is successful because of kids. A large portion of their success comes from kids, and not just kids. But let's not forget that back in 2009, a 10-year-old in 2009, when Endgame came out, was almost 20 years old. Yeah. And now he's going to be having kids soon, or already has kids who he's taking with him to see these movies. We didn't get that same thing with DC. During the Snyderverse, during the Hamadaverse, whatever you want to call it, we didn't get that because of how dark in tone and how dark the visuals for it were. Kids weren't grasping onto it, and neither was the general audience. So I don't think James Gunn is going to go that route. And to go to your point with James Gunn coming from Marvel has an experience, let's not forget that he was originally tapped to be the one that was going to helm the whole universe in space, everything that was going on out in the galaxy, all those movies, Kevin Feige was going to have James Gunn overheading. And then everything happened where he got fired. So he does have an idea. He does have the knowledge on how to do it. He hasn't put it into action yet. And I think that's what scares a lot of people.
I would say this, and I'll say this too, but you have a point. You have a point when it comes down to the actual audience, with the general casual audience and with the kids. But people fail to realize this too. All right. That's why I always say, and I'm not gonna go over this. People have to really think, and beyond when I say this. There has to be a median. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that you got to understand what's in between. For example, all right. If you want to appease to the kids too, that's going to be hard, especially when you have, how can I say this? If you're going to introduce children to DC and you're going to do it through movies, because I still believe, just me, I believe that the movie concept is still kind of messed up. I think if kids is going to get introduced to DC, I think it's good for them to get introduced to DC through animation and through comics. That's just me. Because for the simple fact is they're going to get they're going to get that. When you're going to do live action, you got to remember, You have adults. I said in my video last night, because I did a video on the evolution of Superman. Is the man babies, are they the ones that's making it stagnant? And I said it like this. Everybody that's listening here, they're not a child. If you're coming from Generation X down and you're a millennial, all that kiddie stuff, you outgrew that. You really did. And you want to see these characters be appealing. Children, on the other end, yeah, you want to appease to them too, but at the same time, who wants to see the campy Superman? Don't nobody want to see that.
Well, see, that's where I think you're wrong, because the great thing about comics, and you take a look at and you're a comic aficionado. I know you know comics, Prime. You know, you take a look at things like Superman. Superman stories, they do have some serious stories for sure, but he is a little more bright and happier. The comic is brighter, you know, more fun aesthetically. But then you have Batman, who's darker. And they can go that route with the DC universe. They can go that route where you have the Supermans, you have the Flashes that are a little more lighthearted, that are a little more in tone for kids, but also have the darker Batman. And I think that's what James Gunn is going to do. I think he's going to have a good balance, like you're saying there, a good medium where people can, you know, you can appease all or as much of the audience as possible. If Superman wasn't your style, Batman will be. Or as Kavari here is saying, I think I said Kavari, his name, right? James Mangold's Swamp Thing. It's going to be more of a horror Frankenstein inspired movie. And you can hit a different audience and crowd with that and maybe pull them in. The only problem is when you start spreading too much and trying to hit too many things, then you get nothing, because then it doesn't feel like it's one universe. Then it just feels like it's just a bunch of random films put together in some form or fashion.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but again, it comes down to the writing, and it's also going to come down to the actual execution of the actual material.
100%.
And you know, now it all depends on which version of DC that he's going to do.
Yeah.
Are you going to do the more are you going to do the realistic element? Are you going to do more of the cartoony fake element? We just have to wait and see how they're going to do it. So, you know, we just have to wait and see. You know, I just, you know, do I believe James Gunn and his and what he's going to do is going to do a good job? I believe so. He got some huge shoes to fill, though. He really does. He got some huge shoes to fill, and a lot of people are not going to. How can I put it? Is that how can I explain it? The look is what's going to get me. If the look looks too cheesy for me, I'm not going to be interested. I'm just not.
The only thing I don't want the S on the cape for Superman. Keep the S off the cape. I think it looks like a Halloween costume when there's an S on the cape. That's just me, though.
Right, that's what I'm saying, because there's so many versions of the character where you have different types of the suit. You know, some people like the S on the cape, like you don't like the S on the cape. You know, me personally, I either or. It doesn't bother me with the actual underwear.
Yeah, I don't care about the underwear either. You
know what I'm saying? It doesn't bother me either or, but if I had to choose, I don't want the underwear. Because, you know, and for people that got to understand the story of that or how they even came to put the underwear on Superman in 1937, I mean, y'all gonna crack up once you find out on the reason why the underwear was even involved for Superman and Batman, for them to have underwear on. It will literally crack you up. They have men in diapers. It's tripped out when you find out the whole history of it. But anyway,
Kavari,
people go ahead.
I was going to say, Kavari says Gunn has to find the balance between dark and light. DC really peak when its stories are dark and grounded like Joker and Batman. To a certain audience. I mean, take a look at The Batman, for instance. The Batman didn't even, and I'm not saying it's a failure. It was a financial success, but it didn't even make $1 billion. The success should not always be weighed by financial success or not success. But I didn't like the Batman. I feel that it was too grounded. I feel that we've done a grounded Batman too many times at this point. I want to see a more comic book accurate Batman, which Batfleck kind of was. I mean, he was doing these crazy stunts. He was a one-man wrecking ball. You don't see that very often. You know, he was a brute. I like that kind of stuff. Whereas you see, you know, what's another good example? The Joker. Like, I didn't like the Joker movie because, again, to me, it was just too dark and depressing. But they were successful for different reasons, but not the kind of success that you want a comic book movie studio to be successful with. Because, and I know people don't like hearing it. I know DC fans don't like hearing it, but you have to take a look at what Marvel did and how they were successful. I'm not saying copy what they did, but you see how they were successful. Like I said, with the kids, getting a larger audience to become very financially successful, to be the most financial successful studio of all time. That's what they want to do. And continuing the dark and gritty, like you're saying, is peak Kavari. That is not really what James Gunn is going to do. He's not going to be able to do that because it's not going to get them what they want.
I get what you're saying, but you have to understand at the same time, majority of DC characters are grounded now, especially if you're going to get into it. I see what you're saying, where you want to get and try to, like I said again, with the median, and you want to get into a particular audience. It all depends on what you're going to do with those characters and how you're going to do it. I'm going to tell, I would say this, and I'll put it to you like this. If they make Kal-El sarcastic, it's not going to be successful.
No, I think they got to make Kal-El. They got to make Clark Kent, Kal-El, comic book accurate.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
That's what they need to do there.
Right. And that's and the key point that I'm saying to you is that I just get it a brief. See, with Marvel being at Disney, they didn't follow no concepts from the comics at all. The writers didn't follow anything. They did their own thing. And I get it. I get it. They did their own thing. But when it comes down to DC, this is a totally different beast. This is a totally different animal. Because what carries DC, yeah, the heroes carry it. But what carries DC is the villains. And if you try to shortchange the villains, that ain't gonna work. The villains have to be hardcore and wicked. That's why I say people have no idea. The general casual audience, you think, I'll put you like this. You think Marvel got some villains. They have no idea what they'll be into if you really go fast forward with DC villains. Okay? Because again, I like stuff to be serious. I like stuff to be grounded. I like stuff where, you know, there is adult. You can have campy stuff. You could be silly and stuff like that, but I like that seriousness. I like that real hardcore grounded stuff. That's what I like. The campy stuff could be cool too. It depends on what you put into it. But at the same time, you know, you have, for instance, if James, I'll give you a perfect example on what they can do if you want to make the DCEU successful with the characters. If y'all want to get a good idea of what James Gunn can do, watch Justice League War. If you watch Justice League War, look at the personalities and how they were introduced. If you introduce Hal Jordan being a sarcastic asshole, you're going to win a lot of people. A lot. They're going to like him. If you got Batman serious and grounded the way that he is, you're going to like that. You got Diana actually acting like an Amazon warrior, boom. If you got Superman being the Superman where he has a personality, but he's still a Boy Scout, you're going to win a lot of people.
Yeah.
So if y'all go back and you watch Justice League War, trust me, watch it for the characters. Because in that movie, they're just introducing themselves. They don't even know who they are. They don't even know each other yet. This is the New 52 when it started, and they started with Justice League War. If he does something of that magnitude and the characters act in that way, oh, we got something going.
Yeah.
Oh, we got something going. We want to know why? Because it's going to appeal to children. It's going to appeal to adults. It's going to appeal to everybody because of the characters. If you get a Barry Allen that's goofy, silly, but smart, and then you have that dynamic with Hal Jordan, but it's going to be Jon Stewart. And everybody knows that Jon Stewart, if they can make Jon Stewart silly. That's not his character. Jon Stewart is serious as fuck. You cannot have him be goofy. That will not work. So my only thing is all depends on how it's executed. And if y'all want to get a perfect example, watch Justice League War and look at the characters and how they are introduced. And once y'all see that, y'all will have a clear, good idea of where I'm coming from. If James Gunn decides to do that, that'll be cool. I mean, that would be cool.
Thing is that's New 52, and it seems like, I mean, that was not New 52, but it was based off of New 52. It was built around the New 52 ideas. I don't think James Gunn's going to go that route, but that's not to say that he won't take inspiration from that and take some of those ideas. I want to get to some more of these comments here. Hunter Iggy asks, should James Gunn introduce the new Trinity and Blue Beetle movie? No, I don't think he should. I was a fan of the idea of introducing the new Superman and new Batman in a post-credit scene for The Flash. I think they should have fast-tracked casting those two and having just a little scene and a post-credit scene that introduces that there is a new timeline universe that happened because of The Flash. They didn't do that, so I think they need to just not put him in Blue Beetle. Don't put him in Aquaman. Just do what they were going to do, or do what they're going to do with releasing the movies. Like he wants to release them. Let's see here. What else is there? Kavari says, I get DC movies has to be appealing to audiences, all audience, both adults and kids. Absolutely. Derpy says, James Gunn knows the formula that works and he's not going to get it right. We have to be optimistic. I
agree with that, yeah.
Kavari says, I don't want DC movies to be formula where every movie looks and feels the same like Marvel, and I don't think we're going to get that. Gunn,
I don't think we know.
James Gunn, I think it was when he was on Rosenbaum's podcast Inside of You, I think he stated, like, superhero movies have gotten stale. There's no creativity with it anymore. They're not allowing, like, these writers are just doing the same thing over and over again. And I think that's a great thing for him to realize and notice. And I hope that he pushes the writers he hires, the directors he hires, to be artistic, to do something fun and new. Because the idea is, yes, it's all going to be within one universe, but it doesn't all have to look the same. It doesn't all have to be the same. Like we saw, James Mangold is going to... let's see. Trying to see some of these... What is the plot formula, storytelling? Yeah, Triton, how does first left. So I don't want DC movies. Yeah, we talked about that. Prime, thanks for joining. If I know you're not here anymore, it doesn't look like you're here anymore. Nope, you're not. So thanks for joining, Prime. I don't know what I was gonna say. Like I think it was talking about Superman Legacy and how Swamp Thing. They're not gonna be similar, the same. So yeah, I guess with that, guys, I guess because my internet decided to crap the bed, like I said, I've been having internet problems today. We're going to end this one here. This was a great episode. Thank you everybody so much for joining in. It was a great episode for sure. I had a lot of fun. I really did. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining in. I hope you can hear me. I don't know if anybody's hearing me. Yeah. So great talk, everybody. Make sure you hit that like button, hit subscribe. I got some more videos coming out here in the near future. We got some interviews, stuff like that. Yeah, try and get to bed. If it's 12:30 a.m. there, get to bed. Thanks for tuning in. Derpy, thank you so much. Bye. Triton, get to bed. Yeah, it's been great. I love you guys so much for coming on and talking with me and conversing. Oh yeah, you can see some of my Cheez-Its. 3D printing stuff over there. I do that too as well. So yeah, Guys, thank you all so much for watching. And with all that said, I'll talk at all of you later.